So last time we spoke about the concept of asking for a test, that this whole incident of David Hamelech came about because he'd asked to be tested. So we discussed what that means, what's wrong with asking to be tested, what did he do wrong, what did he do wrong by asking for that. We discussed the idea, well, what is a test for? That was what we discussed then. I'd like to look today more at the details of what actually happened in that incident, in the whole event of Batsheva. Go through some of the details based on the Psukim, the way it's presented in the Psukim, and also based on the Gemara. Certain Gemarot that describe it, and hopefully go through. Oh. My notes. Okay, we'd like to ask a few questions on it. We'd first of all like to clarify what exactly did he do wrong, what was the sin exactly, and also we'll find in the events there's a few things that are questioned about David Hamelech as we go through, about the way he reacts, what he tries to do. There's a series of events. And I guess my question is like this. We said last week that, as the Gemara says the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, says that he had asked to be tested, and Hashem said, look, you shouldn't be asking to be tested. You want to be tested like the Avot were tested? I'll give you a test, and it was much too hard for him. Now, when did that finish? Meaning, how far through the story is this test that Hashem is putting to him continuing? And is it till the end of the story, till we find the end of the story when Uriah Hitti dies and he's with Batsheva and then another son is born? Or is it only after the first event when he actually takes her, and then after that there are other questions on what he does, which are as if normal decisions, which aren't really what this test Hashem is forcing upon him? Because David Hamelech had tests in his life, other tests, as we all do, all the way through his life. He had different Yetzarai, things that he had to decide and he had to overcome. So, is the whole story part of this test that Hashem says to him, I'm testing you now? Or is it only the beginning? How far along? Well, let's see as we go through the Psukim. And also just to understand what exactly did he do wrong, because it's clear from the Pasuk later on, the Navi comes to him and tells him, you've done wrong. So what exactly did he do wrong? So let's see. Let's go from page 180. If you go to page 180, and we're going to read through some of these psukim. We're not going to go to them in fine detail like we do on Shabbat. We're not going to go through all the pshat of every pasuk, but we want to read through it to get an idea of the story, to know what happened. So we'll look at the psukim. So pasuk bet on page 180, pasuk bet. It was in the evening. Vayakum David ma'mishkavo. David got up in the night. Vaytalech al gag beit Hamelech, and he stood on the roof. Vayisha rochet set me'al gag, and he sees this woman showering on the roof. Vayishat vat marim me'od, and she was very good looking. So he calls for her. I'm going to paraphrase. He calls for her. He asks who she is. He calls, and they say that she's Batsheva, Bat Eliam, the wife of Uriah Hitti, the wife of Uriah. Vayishlach David pasuk dalet. He sends his messengers. Vatikahea. He brings her. Vatavo elea vayishkav ima. She comes to him and he sleeps with her. Vehi mitkadeshet mitumata vatashovel betan. And she had that night had done tevila, and she went back to her house. And it says here in pasuk hey vatar haisha. Now this this is definitely part of what we discussed last time. Is part of this. This was the test. Hashem had sent him a test. You think you're going to be like the Avot? You're going to have a glimpse of this beautiful woman, and you're going to immediately ask her to come. Immediately going to bring her to you. The Mefarshim explained that in pasuk hey, this is where it went really badly wrong for David Hamelech. This is what he wasn't expecting. Vatar haisha, she became pregnant. She conceived straight away. Vatishlach vatagid leDavid, and she told David this. Vatomer hara anochi, she said hara anochi. She said that I've conceived. I'm expecting. So now there was this child who was going to be born from a union from a relationship that they'd had, which only him and Batsheva knew about, and maybe the people in the palace. Nobody knew about it. She's suddenly going to have a baby.
So, from what perspective, she was divorced, right?
So that we're going to discuss. I'm going to see in the Gemara now. Yes. So let's read. We're going to read the Pasukim as they present it, and then we're going to and the Pasuk here before says that she was the wife of Uriah Hittite. We're going to see the Gemara about it. Sorry?
Presumably he married her.
David.
Yeah.
Vayikachea usually means with likuchim, with kiddushin, yes. Vayishlach David, the question is how he could if she was married to Uriah Hittite, which we're going to see. Vayishlach David Yoav, shlach elai et Uriah Hittite. Said, then David, his reaction is very interesting. He says to Yoav, bring me Uriah Hittite, the one who is presented as her husband. Vayishlach Yoav et Uriah David, and he brings, Uriah comes to David. In Pasuk Chet, he said, Vayomer David Uriah, he says, Red lebetcha urchatz raglecha, go to your house and wash yourself, prepare yourself, and go to be with your wife. So he had been in battle, he'd been on the battlefront, he's come back, and he's saying, David's telling him, you go to be with your wife, which is the halacha, especially as you've been away. It's appropriate to do that. Vayishkaf Uriah, but what Uriah does in Pasuk Tet, Vayishkaf Uriah petach bet Hamelech. He goes and he rests he instead of going home to sleep at home, he sleeps on the doorway of the entrance of the king's palace. Et kol avdei adonav, with all the servants of the king. V'lo yarad el beto, he didn't go to his house. They tell David, Lo yarad Uriah beto. They tell David he didn't go to his house. Vayomer David el Uriah. David then he confronts Uriah and said to him, Halom miderech ataba. You've come from a journey. You've been away. Madua lo yarad el betecha. Why did you not go to be your wife? That's what you should have done. So David wants him to be with her, right? Seemingly because he wants a child that will be born. He wants people to think the child is from Uriah. That's seemingly as if he wants to cover it up. That's what it looks like. Okay. So Uriah says to him, "Vayomer Uriah David, Ha'aron v'Yisrael b'Yehuda." Yeah. How does she know? I think the Ralbag says that she could tell very early that she felt she's some sort of different feelings, and she could feel that something strange, that she could tell very early on that she's conceived.
Is that Hassan after the event that she...
Pardon?
Hassan after the event that she feel that she conceived?
I don't. This is maybe a few days, a week later, maybe. Yeah, a week later, something like that. Vayomer Uriah David. Uriah says to David, "Why did I not go to be with my wife?" He says, "Ha'aron v'Yisrael Yudah yoshvim basukot." He says that Aaron and the Jewish people are out camping. They're out in battle. It's a wartime. Vadoni Yoav, and then let's look at the wording here. He says, Vadoni Yoav, and my master Yoav. Yoav ben Suriyah was one of the chief of staff, one of the generals in the army. Va'avdei Adoni, and the servants of my master, al Panei Sadeh Honim, are all in the battlefield. Va'ani avoy beti le'echol v'shtol v'ishkav v'mishti. I'm going to go home and eat and drink and be with my wife. Hayecha v'chei nafshecha, your life and the life of your soul. Im esed adavazeh. I'm not going to do such a thing. But look at the wording here. This is important. He says, look at the wording. He's talking to the king, remember, and he says, Vadoni Yoav, my master Yoav, because Yoav was his senior, right? That's a big transgression. That's not acceptable. When you're talking to the king, you don't say, my master Yoav. That's going to be important in the story here. Vayomer David el Uriah, so David says to Uriah, Shev bazeh, he says, Gam hayom macha ashalecha. David seems to change his mind a bit, he seems to retract, doesn't convince him more to go and be with his wife. He says, you stay here, stay with me, it's fine. Vayesh Uriah b'Shalayim b'Amahum machorat, he stayed in Shalayim, he stayed with David, right? So he didn't push him more to go to be with his wife. So, Sorry.
Why did you always have to push Uriah? Because how would other people know that it wasn't Uriah?
Because Uriah had been out on the battlefield. So people would have thought that people wouldn't understand.
How would people know that he didn't go with his wife?
I don't think he was. I think he'd only come back because David had called him back. I think he would have stayed out.
Because they called him back and he stood back. He was stood back.
Yeah, but had he not been back? Yeah, you mean would people know?
That the baby wouldn't be Uriah because he could have came back.
Fine. Okay, fine,
No,
fine.
no,
Good. You mean what David had intended had been carried out, even if he wasn't actually with her. You're
Yeah,
saying.
but I'm saying David didn't have to force Uriah to go.
You're right. I hear. Yeah, you're right. I mean, as long as one night, but the servants knew that he wasn't. The servants, he slept with the servants, so they knew. So they knew that he hadn't been home.
Unless he was only doing it out of that's the right thing.
Because he stood very short time. He didn't stay so long. I think a couple of days.
What? So what?
Oh yeah, with David Hamelech. He didn't stay for a long time in the palace.
Right.
That's why. So he went and then went on the battle.
Right.
So yeah, that's why David Hamelech changed his mind.
Unless he only said it because that's the right thing to do,
What do you mean the right thing?
to send him to his wife.
Why is it the right thing?
Because he's back from the battlefield and back in the city.
No, he was trying
Well,
to like that.
it isn't really. Depends. If he's married to her, then it's the wrong thing to do. And if
Right, so then
It's
how does that
difficult.
work?
so, let's see. We're going to see. Let's just get through the flow of
Yeah.
the story, and we're going to go back into it. And we'll see according to the Gemara. So it says in Pasuk that he didn't go to his house, but in the morning, David then sent. If you look on page 182, the top, Vayihi baboker, Vayichtov David sefer Yoav. Now David writes a letter to Yoav, the general, who's out in the battlefield. Vayishlach biyad Uriah, and he sends Uriah with this letter, and he basically tells Uriah, we'll skip this part. He basically tells him, put Uriah in the front line of battle. Make sure he's in the most dangerous part of the battlefield, and he wants him to be, in order he should get killed in battle. So, and which is what he does. He ends up getting killed in battle, and that's what it says. We're going to jump here. It says in Pasuk Kavav, page 183. Pasuk Kavav, page 183, right at the bottom. Vatishma eshet Uriah, the wife of Uriah, which is Batsheva, heard. Ki met Uriah Isha, for her. She'd heard that her husband, her man. If you look at the wording here, her man Isha, Uriah had died in the battlefield. But he spod al Ba'ala, and she mourned for her Ba'ala, her husband. Right? There's a change in the expression there as well. We're going to come back to that as well. Just note that. Vayavor ha'evel, and then after she finished mourning for him, Vayishlach David vayasfa el beto. David called her to come to his house. He brought her into his house. But he lo leisha, and she was for him as a wife. Vateled lo ben, she had a son. This is the son that had already been conceived beforehand. Now nobody really knew about this other than David. I don't know if Uriah really had known what's gone on.
Short of time, so nobody could.
David probably only, and maybe some of the servants. So it was beseta. The Gemara says it was beseta. It all went on under closed doors. But the pasuk says, "Vayera hadavar asher asa David be'enei Adonai." The thing that David had done was bad in the eyes of Hashem. Hashem was not happy with it. And now we're going to see what Natan Hanavi says to him. In Parent Yud Bet. Vayishlach Adonai et Natan et David. Natan the Navi comes and he's sent with a prophecy, a message from Hashem. Natan was the one who wrote after Shmuel Hanavi, till he died, wrote the book of Shmuel, maybe the Shmuel Aleph, I think, about approximately Shmuel Aleph. After that, the rest of it's written by Natan Hanavi and Gad HaHozer. Natan Hanavi and Gad HaHozer. Natan and Gad wrote the rest of Shmuel, Sefer Shmuel. So Natan is is pretty much the foremost Navi of the time, and he's the Navi who accompanies David Hamelech, who's alongside his godly advice. If you want advice, he gives him advice from Hashem, and he comes and he's sent by Hashem to tell him to give him a message. And he said, "Vayishlach et Natan el David." Vayavo elav, he comes to him, Vayomer, and he said, Vayomer lo shenei anashim. He tells him a mashal. He tells him a story about someone. He says to David, "I want you to tell me what would you make of this story. How would you judge it?" And just as a little introduction, there are two ways that there was the conventional way you can judge, which is through a bet din, a Sanhedrin, the regular judicial system. And there's also what's called the Mishpat HaMelech, which we discussed at length when we talked about that Shaul becoming the king. There's Mishpat HaMelech, which is the judgment of a king, which a king can do judgments really unilaterally without following the rule book. He can decide according to the situation where he feels somebody has done something with malice, done in a worse situation. He can create a punishment or a judgment that's fitting for that situation. He isn't bound by the conventional rules.
So will that judgment become law?
Yeah. Well, it might not be. It might be a one-off judgment that won't apply, or he could institute things that would be for permanent. But he's open to do mishpat Hamelech, his own how he wants to judge. And that's why you see example of where it's brought the famous story where the two women brought before Shlomo Hamelech and they ask him what she should do and whatever, and each one says it's their baby. That's mishpat Hamelech. There's nothing in the Torah that says about how you decide who, there's no psukim about a baby being, and definitely doesn't say to split the baby, right? But that's Mishpat HaMelech. So here, he wants to know, how as the king would you judge this? So I want to give you just to give you a mashal. He says to him like this, or a story. There were two people, Hayu Ba'ir Ehad, in one town, Ehad Ashir Ehad Rash. One was rich and one poor. La'ashir Hayatzon Vakar Bemod. The rich man had plenty flock, plenty and cattle, sheep and cattle, and so he was very wealthy, many possessions. But Larash Enkol, and the poor man has nothing. He's literally a poor piece. He hasn't got a bean. Ki im kivsa ahat ketana shekana. He has one small sheep. This little lamb. He has one lamb, which he bought. Vayhayeha, and then bear in mind when we're reading this. This is a mashal. So he's describing something that has happened, which David actually doesn't twig that he's talking about himself. But look how you have to realize, how does the mashal fit into what's happened? And he says he has one little sheep which he bought by Hayah, and he gave it life. He sustained it. Vatigdal imo, and this sheep grew up with him. Ve'im banav yachtav, and with his family together. Mipitot tochal, it would eat from his own bread. Umikisot tishteh, mikosot tishteh, and they would give him to drink, the sheep to drink from their own cup. Uvhekot ishkav, and they would sleep in their own bed. She was really one of the family. It was like a pet, yeah. But he lo kebat, and it was almost like a child in the house. Vayavo helech leish ha'ashir, and there was a man passing by to the rich man. And look at the wording. First, he's a man passing by, a helech, a man passing by, and the Chachamim explain he means the Yetzer Hara. Right, this is the Yetzer Hara, is the man passing by. So who is the Ashir here? That's quite clear. The Ashir is David HaMelech. The poor man is Uriah Hitti. He's got one wife. David HaMelech has 18 wives. He has a whole house with wives, has riches, has everything. He's the king. This man has one wife, and there's a man passing by. That's the Yetzer Hara. He needs to entertain his guest. This man passing by in the story, right? The rich man needs to entertain his guest. And he feels bad to take from his own. I'm going to take a whole sheep of my own possessions. He doesn't want to. La'asot la'oreah habalot, to do for this guest that's come to him. So a helech is a man passing by, walking. He's popping in, he stops for a drink, and he's on his way. And oreah is somebody who sleeps the night. He's already a bit more at home, right? He's still a guest, but he sleeps the night. And so for this oreah, he doesn't want to use one of his own sheep. Vayikach et kivsat ha'ish harash, he takes the lamb of the poor man. Vayaseha la'ish haba'ilav, he gives it. He said he steals the lamb from the man who only has a lamb, his whole worldly possessions, and he uses it. He shechs it and he feeds it to the man. The man now, he's not a helech or an oreach. He's now a man. He's now part of the household. The Yetzer Hara, right? He's well entrenched. He gives him to this man. He gives it to the man who's come to him. He feeds him. So what should be the halacha of such a man? Meaning that it technically just stole. But we want to know, is it worse than that? What would you do as the king if you have punitive powers, you can decide what to do? What would you do? So David HaMelech's reaction is, Vayeha af David ba'ish me'od. David gets furious about this man. Who is this man? Vayomer Natan, he says to Natan, Hai Adonai ki bemavet, he should die. This man should die. It's horrendous what he's done. He's taken a whole family's possessions. He's left them with nothing. He's got himself. He's got his own. Ha'ish ha'osezot. He says the man that does this, meaning not only what he's done is bad, but he's the man who's doing it is terrible. It's terrible in terms of what he's done. You've taken on a poor person, and the man himself is rich and he needs nothing, and he could take his own. It's terrible from his point of view as well. So from both sides.
If he was poor, it wouldn't be so bad.
Well, it wouldn't be as bad. It's bad from both sides, right? So he should die. Ve'et hakivsa yishalev arba'atayim, and the lamb he should pay 4 times over. Or some say it means 4 doubled, 8 times over. There's different opinions about it. Meaning the halacha in Parshat Mishpatim of somebody who steals a lamb, utvachom charo. If you gonev ish utvachom, if you steal a sheep and you sell it, you have to pay arba tachat haseh. You have to pay 4 times, right? If he's caught with it, he pays 4 times. So he's either saying pay 4, or in some opinions he's saying pay 8. Right? He's doubling it like a penalty, a knas. Ekev, because asher asay hadavar zeh va'al asher lo hamad, because he did this, and furthermore he didn't have pity on the poor man. It's terrible achzariyut, a terrible cruelty what he's done. He should die. That's David HaMelech's reaction. Sorry?
Pay first and then die?
Take it out of the money of the inheritance. Vayomer Natan David. Natan says to David, Ata ha'ish, you're the man. You're the man. Ko amar Adonai Elohei Yisrael. This is what Hashem has said to me. This is what Hashem says. Anochi meshachticha lemelech al Yisrael. I have anointed you to be king of Israel. Va'anochi hisalticha miyad Shaul. And I've saved you from the hands of Shaul. And I've given you the house of your master, meaning you inherited everything from Shaul as well. And you inherited you married his wives as well. And I've given you both households. First you were king over Yehuda, then you became king over Israel as well. You were king over the whole of Bnei Israel. And if you would have held back a little bit more with this sin, that you've not done this sin, I would have added on to you more and more. I would have enlarged I would have given you much, much more. Just if you would have held back. Madua, he says to him very strongly, he says, Madua bazita devar Adonai, why did you degrade the words of Hashem? La'asot hara be'enai, to do the bad in my eyes. Et Uriah Hiti kitab b'harev. So look what he says, what he did wrong. So first of all he says, you've degraded my words, you've done like a Hilul Hashem, basically. And he says, and Uriah Hiti, you caused him to die, you killed him with a sword. And his wife you took as a wife. Lakachta li'isha is interesting. You took as a wife, right? Which seemingly wouldn't be possible were she married to Uriah Hiti. He couldn't have taken her as a wife. You can't marry someone else's wife, right? You could do the ceremony, put a ring on, do a chuppah, but nothing happened, right? You did, it's like marrying your sister or something, or your mother. It's not tofes, doesn't work. So he says you took her as a wife. And him you killed using the sword of the Bnei Ammon, which they were fighting at the time. The Bnei Ammon, that was the enemy. You killed him. You killed him by putting him in the front line. Because of that, and because of that, the sword will not leave your house forever. Because you've degraded me, you've made me look bad, you've made me look low. You took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be to you as a wife. And furthermore, Natan says to him, Hashem has said, I'm going to establish bad from your house. It's going to come bad from your house. I'm going to take away your wives in front of your eyes. And they're going to go to other people. And they're going to lie with your wives in full glare of everyone. You're going to be terribly degraded. Why? Because you did this sin in hiding, in private. We see here, I'm going to do this in front of everyone. That we say, the Gemara says in many places that that somebody who's over averot baseter, somebody who does averot in hiding, in private, he thinks no one sees, he will be paid back in front of everyone. He thinks that he's getting away with it, or he doesn't appreciate that Hashem is watching, and he'll be paid back in front. That's what Hashem says to him here. So clear that not many people knew about this, only Hashem and the Navi. And the Navi for sure didn't see it, and he comes with a prophecy. He says, this is what Hashem has told me. So the Navi knew everything. So this is very harsh, and this would have been the punishment if not for David's reaction. Because David says, if you see his reaction, Pasuk Yud Gimel, Vayomer David el Natan hatati l'Adonai. David says to Natan, I have sinned to Hashem. That's what he says. And this is in contrast, there's nothing more. There's nothing more now. He doesn't say anything else. In contrast to Shaul, who said, I've sinned, but the people told me. I've sinned, but this. I've sinned. Always was a but. And it took a few times till Shmuel told Shaul off, until he said, okay, you're right. Here, David, the first time he tells him, you've sinned, Hashem is furious with you, he says, I've sinned. I hold my hand up. Nothing, no excuses, no buts, nothing. Vayomer Natan el David, Natan says to David, Gam Adonai he'evi hatatecha lo tamud. Natan says to David, Hashem, I understand from Hashem that He has accepted your teshuvah and you won't die.
Like
Yeah.
instant.
It seemed to be as if he understood that David was so genuine and so heartbroken, and he accepted from the Navi. The Gemara says that Gam means your teshuvah included vidui, the fact that you've done vidui, you said out what you did wrong, you said chatati, and it's genuine. You has a real charata, and the Navi knew that. The Navi knew what David's, or Hashem knew what David's real feelings were, and he says Hashem has accepted your teshuvah as much as you won't die. So a lot of the punishments were pushed aside. Efes, however, ki ne'es ni'asta et oyevei Adonai. We're going to see part of the tshuva would have to be, she'd gone back to him anyway. Well, he was, you mean now, sorry, you're right. He was living with her. So let's see now what he says what's going to happen. There's more ramifications here, because Natan says, however, because you have because you have despised or blasphemed, you've cursed so Oyevei Hashem, the most Mepharshim explain means it's a kinui, as if to say Hashem. The enemies of Hashem is like a nice way of saying you've cursed it Hashem, give you a chas v'shalom. As the Navi didn't want to say such language. Therefore, he says, since you've done that by bringing out this chilul Hashem, by people seeing what you've done, or by this terrible act that I'm unhappy about, Gam haben hayilod lechamot yamut. This son that was born will die. That's going to be one of the punishments. The son will die. Vayelech Natan el beto. Natan went. Vayigof al neit hayeled. The lad got ill. Asher yadai tzurah li'esh vaye'aneach, and he became deathly ill. And you find here it's very interesting that David doesn't take this lying down. He determined to save this child. He prays for the child, and he begs Hashem to spare him. Even though there was a gezerah that the child's going to die, David said, there's a gezerah, but I've done teshuvah, and a bad gezerah I can overturn. Any bad gezerah a person has, a person with their tefillot, and with their genuine, honest, with their real teshuvah, they can overturn it. That's what he wanted to do. I can't hear you, so that's why what's one?
I thought Hamelech, the Brit HaKodesh, knew that he had offspring from that woman.
Yes.
So
That's right, he did know that as well, yes.
So why would he believe that the child would die?
Maybe have another child. Well, she does in the end. But he didn't want to lose this child. He prayed for him. He says, look at the gezerah. Even the Navi has told me explicitly that the child's going to die. I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to try with my tefillot. So he says, he prayed to Hashem on behalf of for the son. Vayatzom David tzom, and David, he fasted as well. Uvar v'lan v'shachavatza, and he went to the bed Hamikdash. He went to the Ben Josh. He slept on the ground. He was like in complete teshuvah, complete determined. Vayakumu ziknei beto alav lakimo min haaretz, and the elders of the house tried to get him up, tried to pull him out of this state he was in. V'lo ava, he wouldn't agree. V'lo vara itam malachem, and he didn't eat bread with them. So he was fasting and he was praying. And it came the seventh day that the child died. Some say the seventh day from when he got ill, seventh day from when he was born, the child died. And they were scared, they were fearful to tell him that he died. They didn't want to tell him. But they saw that his servants were dealing with something had gone on. They understood there was some tumult, something happening. And he understood that the child had died. And he asked him, has the child died? He said, yes, he's dead. And this is interesting now. Now, he gets up and he has a shower and he carries on. Back to normal as if. And he changed his clothes. When he came to the house of Hashem, and he came before the Aron, I think it is, and he bowed. And he bowed. No, sorry, it says the house before the Aron came there, where the Mizbeach was. And he came to his house. And he ate normally. And the servants said to him, we're quite confused. His servants said to him, what are you doing? But when the child's alive, you fast and you cry. Now he's dead, which you should be mourning. You go and eat and you're back to normal. What are you doing? But he said, whilst he was still alive, I fasted and I cried. I thought, who knows? The Navi has told me he'll die. Who knows though? Maybe Hashem will have grace with me, he'll feel pity for me, and he'll change his gezerah. Maybe there's a chance. There's never, even as much as the gezerah seems so terrible and it's so sure, you mustn't give up. A person mustn't give up from praying to Hashem. There's always a possibility that Hashem will overturn the gezerah. Sometimes if he doesn't, it may be that the gezerah is in the person's good to stay. But the person mustn't give up from praying, and then the prayers will go for something else. It's always must keep on praying. We see a very important, the way David reacts is very, very enlightening. The Atani says, now that the child died, Lama zeh hanitzam, why should I fast? Can I get him back? What's the point? What's the point? As if I'm not gonna get the child back. I'm not gonna pray for him to come back to life. I'm going to him, he won't come back to me. David. He's saying, I will go to his grave and he's not going to come back to me. He's gone. He's gone, so I have to move on as if. David, and David became, was comforted at Batsheva. He comforted Batsheva Ishto, Batsheva his wife. He was comforted with Batsheva his wife. And he was with her and he lay with her. And she had another child. And she called him Shlomo. So that Shlomo came from the second conception. And Hashem loved him. Right? Now this is also very, very telling, because the halacha is, just bear this in mind, we're going to go back now and analyse the story. The halacha is, if somebody has an affair, if you want, with a married woman, so when she's married, of course, it's asur. That's straightforward. Even if she subsequently gets divorced, there's an isur. The man she had the relation with, the man she had the affair with, cannot marry her. There's an isur. The Gemara learns from the Gemara learns that there's an isur of a bo'el. It's not an erfa. It's isur love. It's an isur love, and he's not.
It's not when he gets with a married woman.
When he's with the married woman, it's isur correct.
Yeah.
That's clear. But now let's say she's not married anymore. She's divorced. The man finds her with someone else, and he divorces her, kicks her out. She cannot go and marry the man she has an affair with.
She does it for love.
He's of isur love. Yeah, it's a love each time they're together, right? Yeah, that's clear. Now, here it says that he had.
But the second, so he'll have two punishments.
Well, yeah, it's like somebody who goes b'chalel Shabbat and eats chazir. Two different isurim. Yeah, he's not in a good
Man,
way.
woman.
Or even different.
Sorry? So even after man, if she was bo'el her, there's an issur to the bo'el and to the niva and to the baal as well. The husband also cannot be with her. Yeah, she's asur to the husband now.
So what way was the wife punished now?
The wife is issur she's chayav mitah, chayav karet mitah as well.
So sure is it wrong?
No, I'm saying but she was commanded by the king, so she didn't have a great deal of choice in this.
So she was forced.
And it
It
was
was
if you're
forced,
commanded by the king to do an avera, that means.
She shouldn't. No, you're not supposed to listen technically, but whether she should
But
done.
it wasn't really.
You just said earlier.
Right, so we're going to see. Let's discuss. Let's go back to that. What I'm pointing out is here that what's telling from the end of the story is that it says Hashem ayevo, Hashem loved him, and it says in the next pasuk, the last pasuk, Vayishlach biyad Natan hanavi, he went to tell Natan hanavi, Vayikra shemo Yedidia. Natan hanavi said that Hashem, or it could be David, called him Yedidia, the beloved of Hashem. Yedid is like a friend of Hashem. So she called him Shelomo, Vatikra shemo, the mother called him Shelomo, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or David, called him Yedidia. But for Adonai, because Hashem had indicated that that's what he should be called. Now that's interesting. If he's a man who's cut, now if she was actually married to Uriah at the time that David took her, which is the simple reading of these psukim, that means that at that time, of course, David and Batsheva would have been chayav mitah. More so, though, even after Uriah died, David being with Batsheva, they could get married. Kiddushim would work because it's a love. It's like a kohen marrying a gerusha or something. It would work, but it's asur. It's forbidden because they've had a relationship before when she was a married woman.
Yeah,
How a child born from that relationship, the Malbim and many others point out, no, not mamzer, because it's still love. And mamzer only comes from chayav mitah to chayav karet. It wouldn't be a mamzer, but the first child would have been a mamzer. Yeah, that's the first thing. And secondly, well, if it was a kohen, it would be halal, yes. But secondly, to say that Hashem loved him, Hashem, and this Shlomo Hamelech was the continuation of Malchut Bet David. That seems implausible. So it's from the story itself. It seems that it wasn't quite as it's presented early on. Yeah. Also, another thing is that. So let's go back a bit and let's look through. And we're going to look through. Let's look at the Gemara. Gemara in Sanhedrin says, this is source 2. So Shmuel, if you look on the grey part they put here, it's a bit blurry, but it's not too bad. You actually get a drink if you don't mind.
Do you have a cup?
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Well, I can cut it out. Yeah, that's so far. Come on, take it. Okay, it's very hard.
Second thought. Thank you.
I was reading a Rambam today where he said you should have olive juice. He said you should have olive water. You should drink chicory water. Because that way you only have what sustains you.
Okay. So we look at the Gemara in Shabbat Nun Vav. Last week we looked at the Gemara in Sanhedrin that we're speaking about the background to him asking for the test and the way the test came about. This Gemara now goes through the carry out of the test and the subsequent events. So the Gemara says, you look in the grey part, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonatan. And it's interesting, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonatan is going to come up again. It seems that he was giving a shiur about this topic, because he's got a few things to say about it. So we'll see. He says, it's this famous line here, Kol ha'omer David hata, eno ela to'eh. Somebody who thinks that David sinned, anyone who says David sinned is wrong, is mistaken. Now the first question you can ask on that is, well, Natan and Avi told him that he sinned. Natan said, Hashem said you sinned. So, Hashem said he sinned. So, what does the Gemara mean? The Gemara means that anybody who looks at it at face value and thinks that it's a sin that you might think you might get impressions is by reading the Pesukim, then you made a mistake. Don't think it's the sin that you would understand it is by reading it as on face value. And the Gemara's going to explain. Shene'emar, as the Pasuk says, there's a Pasuk earlier which we already learned this on Shabbat. Vayhi David l'chol derachav maskil v'alnaimo. That David was successful in all his ways, and maskil means he had the Shekhinah with him. Hashem imor, Hashem was always with him. We explained this Pasuk at the time, a few Shabbatot ago, we explained it means that we find, for example, Shimshon had times when Hashem was with him, where he had these Ruach Hashem came over him, and he was able to kill a whole load of Perishtim, or an animal, or lions, or whatever. We find Shaul as well. He had this times of great inspiration where he was miraculous in battle. Yonatan went out and beat off the whole Perishti army. They had times of tremendous inspiration, times of tremendous Shekhinah. The Shekhinah was really with them. This pasuk is saying that Hashem, Vayhi David l'chol derachav maskil, that David came to a situation where not only originally he had these sparks of godly, divine help, he came to a point, at that point in the story, after he'd been anointed and Shaul and he'd been in the house of Shaul, and he'd gone out to battle and been successful. Hashem imor means that Hashem was with him the whole time. Like Shimshon had little flashes of it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was with David constantly.
But was that destiny from the Adam Rishon? When he gave the 70 years. So he was already, his future was already done.
The 70 years is done, but I'm talking about how he had the Shekhinah with him. He had the
he only supported him because he already...
He didn't have it the whole time. It only at one point in his life when he became very successful, and that point from then on, Hashem was with him in a permanent way. So Barbanel says that, yeah?
We did it a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, we mentioned a couple of weeks ago. The Barbanel says that, right? So the Gemara says, were David to do a chet like this, the pasuk would not earlier on have testified that Hashem is with him the whole time. It doesn't make sense. It's not possible. That's what the Gemara is saying. This is how Ben Ishchai explains this. Even though this happened before, the pasuk before said that Hashem was with him, but the pasuk would not have pointed it out. Were you going to sin in such a serious way a bit later on? And the Gemara then elaborates. The Gemara says, "Efshar het bali yado u'shchina imo." Can it be there's a chet coming to him, a sin coming his way, such a severe sin of a married woman, and Hashem is the Shekhinah is with him? Ela mani mekayem madua bazita et dvar Adonai la'asot hara. How do you explain Natan Navi's admonition when Natan Navi says to him, "You've degraded the words of Hashem, and you've to do bad." La'asot hara. Shebikesh la'asot v'lo asa. He intended to do bad and he didn't do bad. He did something that looked like it was bad, but it wasn't actually the bad that it looked like. So why it says la'asot? It says la'asot hara, to do bad. So the Gemara explains and says. It's interesting. Look at the Gemara says. Amar Rav says, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Da'ati mi David, who was a descendant of David, mehapech v'darish b'zchutei David. He is looking around to find a good merit of David, right? His ancestor. That's what Rav says, and he says that. And this is going to be Rabbi now, v'darish, and he said, Madua bazit devar Hashem la'asot hara. Rabbi explains, what's Natan Navi saying? Mishunah ra'a zo mikol ra'ot shebatorah. This bad, this evil is described in a very different way, in an unusual way, different from all other bad averot that talked about in the Torah. Why? Shekol ra'ot shebatorah ketiv behu vayas. In all other times when the Torah says that he did something wrong, it says vayas, he did the bad. Vayas hara ben Hashem. V'kan ketiv la'asot. Here it says la'asot hara. This isn't a regular expression. Normally it would say, it doesn't say to do the bad, it would say vayas hara, he did the bad. So the slight, the unusual expression is saying shebikesh la'asot v'lo asa. He did something that looked like he was doing bad, but he didn't do bad. What is that though? What's the Gemara referring to? So it could be. So Gemara. Let's just see it a bit further. Et Uriah ahiti hikita beharev, First of all, the Gemara says the Uriah Hittite, that this is what Natan HaNavi said. Natan says to David, Uriah, you struck him with a sword, you killed him with a sword. Shahaya lecha leduno b'Sanhedrin v'lo danta. You should have judged him. If you felt he did something wrong, you should have judged him in Bet Din, in Sanhedrin. What did he do wrong? So he did wrong that he called, not that he didn't listen to David Hamelech necessarily, that he explained that Aaron is there, and I'm not going to go and sleep with my wife while the Aaron is in the battlefield. And David seemed to accept that because he didn't push him further. But yet, what he did wrong was he said Adoni Yoav. He described Yoav as my master in front of the king, and that's Mored b'Malchut. That's a rebellion. That's rebellious. You can't use such expressions in front of the king.
So can I ask, did Melech call a rape on the battlefield?
Yeah.
But if you wouldn't have called him, would he have still died in the
No,
battlefield?
it was put specifically in the front line at the second stage.
Why didn't you put him in the battlefield rather than bringing him back?
He wanted him to first go with his wife, that people would think that she's conceived from him.
Yes, but if he died in the battlefield, then it was okay. She's with her.
He didn't want, he died in the battlefield in the end. So in the same point, but the reason.
Why did you write a letter to the general to put him in the battlefield rather than coming back?
Because he didn't, the fact that he appreciated that there was something wrong. What's the bikesh asot ra velo asa? What is the bikesh? So what explanation is, the Tosfot explains that he did something that looked to people as eshetish. The fact that she was in this limbo situation. What happened? We need to just bit more. Let's get a bit more information because we're assuming something. And I don't know if it's clear to everyone. Let's just go a little bit further and we'll come back to that. The Gemara says, "Ve'et ishtecha lakachta lecha leisha." His wife you took as to you as a wife. Likuchin yesh lechaba. You took her as a wife. There was kiddushin. It worked. How so? How could you take her as a wife when she's married to him? So Gemara says, "Da amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani amar Rabbi Yonatan, kol hayotze lemilchemet David kotev get keritur leishto." Any soldier that would go out to the battlefield as a soldier of David HaMelech would write a get to his wife. In case he gets left out in battle when nobody's sure if he came back or not, is he still alive, is he dead, and the wife's stuck. So you write a get in advance. As we see, one second. This is we had with David HaMelech when David came to his brothers in the time of Goliath. He took them, according to one explanation, according to this Gemara, he took from them a get to give to their wives. So we see already a presence there. We see that was what David HaMelech that was already done at that time. That means a get. So, what were we going to say?
Okay, so if he wrote his wife a guest, so I'm bringing him back in the battlefield with another guest. Come back.
Right, so in the get the get would be written with a condition that if he dies in the end, but if he does the end of the war, so he could go back to the battle and it wouldn't annul it. It would still hang it while the battle's going on. It wouldn't matter if he came home. He wouldn't annul it because the battle's still going on.
But if he comes back and told him that was to sleep with his wife,
yeah.
He get with another wife.
Yeah, that's true. That then.
So I'm asking why did Governor ask him to come back in the first place?
Because he understood there would be, according to the Malbim explains that there would have been tremendous chilul Hashem with people to work out that he'd conceived from David. She'd conceived from David.
Yeah, but I'm saying this, why did Governor that he doesn't have to talk without coming back?
No, because that's what I'm saying to you. Because then people would realise that this child was conceived from David.
Yeah, but
no, but that's what I'm saying to you. That's what I wanted to explain. That the Gemara is saying, what's Natan HaNavi saying? Let's go to the mashal. Let's go to the story. There's a few things going on here. Let's just take it step by step. Natan HaNavi has said to him, there was this rich man and the poor man, and the rich man took from the poor man. What did David do wrong here? Natan says, this is you. This is David. What did David do wrong? The Gemara says, as Yossi's asking, that they would write a get. They would write a get in case he dies, and if he dies, the get becomes valid. So if he doesn't die, then he comes back, the get they throw away. If he does die, she was already divorced from earlier, right? The get's retroactive, right? Right. So the question, so what did he do wrong? He did wrong that at that stage, he's unsure whether she's going to be divorced or not. Now, it's true if she eventually becomes divorced, maybe it could be, Tosfot discusses this, but it could be that she's already divorced from now. But the fact is, at that stage, who would do that? If you see a woman who you know the husband has written a get, but it's on condition that something happens, so you don't know at this stage whether she's divorced or not. Would you marry that woman at this stage? You're taking a chance. It's a suffix, right? That's a chilul Hashem. For David Hamelech to do that was unacceptable. That's Natan saying. It's irrelevant. That's what I'm saying to you. It's irrelevant for the chilul Hashem. If he would have said he would have sent a message to Yoav, put him in the front line, get him killed now. The chilul, and then she bears a child now. She has a child. So where did this child come from? From David that had relations with her while Uriah was out in battle and hadn't died yet.
No, but he would have waited until his news actually died.
To what?
To go with his wife.
But he'd already been with her.
If why didn't you wait
No, they had the Yetzirah was there. That's the thing. That was the test. He saw this woman. He wanted her now.
Yeah, this man exactly what I was going
That's
to ask.
what the first. Sorry.
That's why I was going to ask.
What?
It was meant to happen this way.
Yes.
because He just saw this woman and just everything started from
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah. So he wasn't put in a test that was going to be a straight out eshet ish. That's what I was saying. He wasn't marrying a straight out married woman. He wasn't taking a straight out married woman, but he was put in a test where there's a woman that she has this get hanging over her, and it's inappropriate for him to marry her. And yet he saw her and straight away took her. You should have waited till she died, whatever. And that's what the Gemara says. It was like he ate a fruit that was not ripe yet, an unripe fruit, because he was destined for her anyway. Shlomo, that her child was a child that was going to carry on the royal lineage. So it was she was clearly destined for him. But no, he had the test was at that point. Was he going to want her at that point? He desired her at that point. He took her at that point. But the Natan says to him, Bazita Devar Hashem. You've taken something that wasn't for you at that point, even though it's not. The Gemara says it's a ta'ut to say it was eshet ish, but for you it was inappropriate, completely inappropriate. You shouldn't have taken her. So that seems to be that was the sin at that point. But so this is David HaMelech now realizes. So had he just had a relation with her, and then nothing happened after that, then Natan may have come to him and said, you've done wrong, and he may have done teshuvah, but he wouldn't have called. He didn't need Uriah to go with her, right? If she didn't conceive. The problem was that the Chilul Hashem wasn't just something that him and Hashem knows and Batsheva knows about, that he has to do teshuvah for. The Chilul Hashem was much greater than that now because there's a child on its way. And David HaMelech needed to mitigate that Chilul Hashem. So he said...
How would people have known it's David?
Because he was out on the battlefield at that point.
Yeah, but...
If he would have been out, if he would have stayed on the battlefield...
But if there was no child...
No child, there would have been no prop, right?
Yeah, then how would they have known it's David? They would have had to have known... Because if there was no child, they wouldn't have known anything.
Yeah, nothing about the whole thing. You wouldn't know anything about the whole thing. Maybe
So
2 or 3
So
people.
then why assume it's David if there's a child? If you're an average Joe...
It's got to come from... then it would have got, the word would
So
have
if
got
there's no
out.
child,
The word would have
got
got
out
out.
if there's a child.
Yeah, the child and the word would have got out. Everyone would have found out it's David. So David was prepared for... So what was David doing then? The Malbim says David was going to bring Uriah back to be with her. That would have... Then what's the status of the marriage now?
Probably would have been more problem.
What would be the status of the marriage now?
He really can't, because if his wife was taken by somebody else,
Yeah.
she can't have to her husband, can she?
Well, no, she can't. But either one of them she can't go with. If you say, well, she can go back to her husband because that's her husband.
Well,
It can work.
maybe
But he didn't know.
But
He
there's
doesn't
a problem
know
with
as
the
well, yes.
child.
The problem with the child, number one,
Yeah.
and number two, there's David wanted that people would think that it was Uriah's child, so he thought in that way it would decrease the Chilul Hashem. But that wasn't necessarily right. The Abar Benel points out here 5 things he says David HaMelech did wrong.
Could I ask, I don't know, there's a question I talk
Yeah.
about. To reduce the Chil Hashem, why did Hashem make it concealed?
I don't know. That's a bit beyond the scope of this. Yeah, we could. I think that's part of him. Maybe that's part of.
Fallout.
I don't know. But Hashem, we have to sometimes be responsible for the Chil Hashem.
It's when he said he asked for a test, and maybe that was when
Well, part of the
that
problem.
moment, that moment when he got the lady.
That's the
That's
consequence of asking for the test. This is what you get.
This is
So
it's
as
gone
to
far
draw-
worse.
to
It's
draw
gone
one thing
way out of
that-
hand.
To draw
really.
one thing that will come to mind as a comparison is like when Moshe Rabbeinu went down to the pyramids and said what's happening to all these babies in the pyramids, and
Yeah.
Hashem said choose one,
Yeah.
and he saved him, and that
But
ended up,
horrendous Chil
and that
Hashem.
ended, yeah, but that
Terrible
ended up
damage.
being
Michal.
Michal,
Yeah. So it's like you want to change.
you wanna change things.
You want to get a test, and you
Here,
shouldn't.
have the
And
baby.
you see what kind of mess has come from it. Yeah. The why exactly a baby, I don't know, but yeah, there's something along those lines. But what the Barbanel, I want to say over the Barbanel says there's 5 things that David HaMelech was wrong about. If you read the Pesukim at face value, if you ignore the Gemara and you read it at face value, it says there's a question of a married woman. There's a question of making Uriah come back and be with her as if to cover it up,
That's bad.
right? That's if you look at it.
That would have been really bad if they were
Yeah, that was
together.
that's the
That would have
highest.
been a real mess. If
Yeah.
Then he says another problem was that he got Uriah killed in battle. You got him killed in battle, and he says another issue is why if you look in the battle, this is not. If you look in the battle, he doesn't just get Uriah killed in battle. He sends a whole load of people with Uriah, and he gets, according to the way Barbara explains it, he gets a whole load of other soldiers killed with Uriah, which he said isn't right. The others disagree. Malbim says that's not what happened, and the fifth Avera, the fifth question he has on David is in the story. There was another question I didn't have in my notes. Maybe we'll come to in a minute. He said, and so the Malbim explains that first of all the Gemara says that Eshetish is not really an Eshetish. The Gemara says there was a get there, but it didn't look right. It wasn't appropriate for him to marry him. The point of him coming pulling Uriah back to be with her was in order to make people so people shouldn't realize it from David, because he realized that it was wrong what he'd done, or he realized that he realized at that point there was a problem, was the Chilul Hashem. So he pulled Uriah back from the battlefield to be with her, or people at least thought that he'd been with her. Then he got David killed. David got Uriah killed because he said to Yoav, my master. So that was the reason why he got killed. And he didn't actually. The Malbim says he didn't actually get a lot of other people killed in the battlefield. It was only Yoav. So he came to when we get to Nathan Navi, when Nathan Navi arrives in David's house, David thinks there's nothing. Everything's worked out fine. Uriah's died, so there was a get. People don't know whether it's. People might think it's from Uriah. They don't necessarily know that I'm the one who had this child because Uriah was. They think maybe Uriah was with her that night. So I got rid of the Chilul Hashem. I took away Chilul Hashem. He was killed because he was Mored b'Malchut. He was rebellious by speaking to me like that. So I didn't do anything wrong. I'm happy. David had he was a tzaddik as far as it was at that point. Nathan turns up and he tells him, you've got a lot of issues. There's a major problem here. You might be, it all happened in hiding and you've managed to cover it all up. So you think you've mitigated the Chilul Hashem. You've limited the Chilul Hashem. But really what you've done was terrible as far as HaKadosh Baruch was concerned. That it was not accepted of you as David HaMelech, as a king, to take her in that situation. You failed the test. I was wondering how much this is what I said at the beginning, and I'm wondering if I can ask. Maybe you'll appreciate this question a bit more now. We explained last time that Hashem said, "I'm going to test you," right? So there was a test here that was an unusual test that he'd asked for, a test that was going to be more difficult than normal, that he could pass. It wasn't a test that he was forced into. He could pass it, but it was a test that was much more difficult because he'd asked for it. As if Hashem had said to him, you're asking for a test which is not the right time to be tested. I'm not going to help you with this test. Normally a test Hashem helps you with. I'm not going to help you. Let's see if you can do it. Let's see if you're like the Avot. Then there's also other tests a person has, which are regular tests, right? which part of this story, where does the avot test end in this story, and when do the regular tests start? How do you see in this story? That's what I'm thinking. I'm wondering. That for sure, him seeing, it's certain that when he sees Batsheva on the roof, that was the avot test, if you will, and that was the test he'd asked for. When he now realizes, well, she's expecting, there's a major problem now. Now his question of where he does something wrong, where he calls him back to go and try and... Pardon?
When the child.
No, the child, that wasn't his do. The child is the child. That the child isn't. He doesn't have a test about the child. The child is just conceived. It's a fact. Sorry.
He took it away. He died. The first child died.
Yeah, Hashem. Not David didn't. I'm saying which parts were there were certain checkpoints in this story where David Hamelech has to make a decision about what to do. So the first one is when he sees Batsheva. The second one is when he hears the child is conceived, and then he decides to call Uriah back to be with her. Yeah? No? Yeah. Oh. Then he goes and gets David. Then he goes and gets Uriah killed in the battlefield. Which bits are they all this test of this strong test that David has asked for? Or are they tests? Is the first test when he takes Batsheva? That's the test. Afterwards, is his own failings, if you want. Those are the regular tests.
Does anyone say something on this, or is it?
No, I'm asking. It's my question. I don't have a clear answer. It's just a question I was wondering about. I don't know what you think.
That was the song with when you met
the first one. The first one was the avot test, and after that was the way he has to deal with it. It's a regular.
He's a king. He can make decisions.
And it's a test, maybe. He's got, but it's not what he, maybe.
It could be that the main test was that he couldn't wait.
Pardon?
The main test was that he couldn't wait.
Yes, yeah, for sure. That's right. He had to. At that point, he wanted that.
And the rest was, as you say,
regular.
I think certainly the first test. I think Natan coming up to him and telling him that was also an avot test.
That's a test, is what's it, and see how his reaction.
Just a test. That's also an avot test.
That's a very very important point Mayor's saying now. Very very important point. This is really what we're going to discuss next time. This is really going to be we've got now a picture of the story. Really, all we've done today is discuss the story and we discussed the technicalities of it and the understanding a little bit of depth. But the Gemara says. The Gemara we started off with last week, that he wanted to be one of the avot, right? So there were 3 avot who each had brought their own aspect of Avodat Hashem, right? We described it as a Merkava, the chariot. So there's 3 wheels of the chariot. There's 3 wheels so far. The chariot has 4 wheels. It's not a tricycle. The chariot has 4 wheels, right? And this chariot is what the Shekhinah rides on. Is what brings. The Shekhinah brings the perception of Hashem into this world. Which is what we're doing, what we're about. David HaMelech is the 4th regular Shekhinah, the 4th wheel of the chariot. And what the 4th wheel that he is what Meir just said. That he spends the rest of his life doing teshuvah for this sin that he did. Even the Gemara says Eno Chotei, didn't do a chet, meaning maybe he didn't do Eshetish, but what he did do something that he wasn't expected to do, that was wrong, and he spends his life doing teshuvah. That's the 4th wheel of the chariot. That's the 4th aspect of Avodat Hashem. The first 3 aspects are the avot is chesed and gevurah and Torah, meaning you've got the chesed, you've got midat hadin, you've got different ways of ahava, yirah. You've got Yaakov, the middle way. You've got that encompasses Avodat Hashem. The 3 avot encompass Avodat Hashem. But then there's a 4th piece to the puzzle which encompasses everything, which is teshuvah, which is failing and being able to go back. And that is David HaMelech here. That's his chatati is what Hashem wanted to see from him. We'll discuss this at greater. We'll discuss this more. But he. That's what needed to come out, and we need to understand that some of the questions we can leave off with are why did it come out like this? Why is it that if the marriage which was preempted by which was preceded by this whole kind of ugly event is the marriage that then Shlomo HaMelech comes from, who is the one who builds the Beit HaMikdash, who is the one who's going to be the father of Mashiach, It's really the hemshech of Klal Yisrael, the hemshech of the world, to bring the world to its tikkun, to its perfection, to the aim of where we want to be. And that came about through this kind of unseemly event. So it's something very significant in the Avodah of David Hamelech. We should try to understand a bit deeper.
So it's basically past his touchdown. I'm sure it's past his touchdown.
So he didn't, but he did. Yes, that's
Or would it have
basically-
been that if he'd have passed it the first time, Stromer would have been like...
so the Batsheva, we're going to try and speak about that next week. But please God, we'll try and explain that. So the just to sum up, really the I just wanted to say about the mashal of Natan is just going to go. Just give me trying to find in the mashal here. Yeah, because that's what it says in the pasuk. If this is what is interesting, that the Malbim explains in the pasuk. This is what I forgot to mention. If you look on, this is the pasuk we pointed out as we went through the story. It says here, sorry, one more page. So she heard that Isha. So there's a difference between Isha and Baal, Ish and Baal. Pasuk says, Al tikreli. It says, Od Baali ki imishi. It says, don't call me. Don't be. I don't want to be. You don't want you to be my husband, Baali. I want you to be my man, Ishi. There's a difference between Ish and a Baal. A Baal means is a more functional description of a husband. The husband, the one that's Baal is Bilashon Bo'el, the one that has relations with her, the one that is her husband, the other half, her other half, if you want, her partner. That's a Baal, who she's married to. Ish means she's his man. She's the one she looks up to, the one that she loves, the one she has connection to, the one that she's close to. So the pasuk says, at the point where Uriah died, she heard that her husband Isha means this Ish, which to everyone he was her husband. The public perception was that it was her husband. Vatispod al Ba'la, but she lamented, she mourned for her Baal, the one that, as if the other half, not really her husband. That's what pasuk is hinting at here. And he wasn't really her husband at that point. It wasn't really what you'd call it Ish. It was technically she'd been married, if not for the get, and that's it's pointing out the difference here. So. I think what's important to take out is that you see from the mashal of Natan and the reaction of David. David says, "There's no way." David says, "This man has done terrible thing, and I would judge him to death, and I would judge him. He should pay double. Really, a very severe crime. Meaning, not really what he should be chayav, because he just stole. The man in the mashal just stole from the poor man. He should get a terrible punishment." And Natan says to him, "That's you. I'm not looking at technically what you did. Technically, she wasn't married, there was a get, there was this, there was that. But you're David Hamelech. This is not what we expect of you, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu would really kill you now. HaKadosh Baruch Hu would bring terrible, terrible punishment on you." So that's really from the mashal itself. You see that what the Gemara is saying is that the sin is not really as you think it is. It's not really it's David who's being punished because of who he is, because of what's expected of him. But that is part of it. The main aim here is, as Meir said, it's the teshuvah, the way he reacts. And B'ezras Hashem, we're going to explore that more. We're going to wrap that up more next week. B'ezras Hashem. Okay, we'll stop there.